And now let's get to our really big segment. We got a really big segment coming up for you. Really big segment. Where it's going to be a good thing that I took my blood pressure pills right before I started the show, because this is why Disney has pissed me off this time, or as you see in the rundown, Disney. That's right. So, I've spent all this time, it's been weeks and weeks and weeks. We've been going through books and books and books on this, covering a new book every week. And I've mentioned a little bit about the Disney fan films, and I've mentioned some stuff that kind of pisses me off about it, but I haven't really gotten to a full movie. But I didn't have anything else to give you today. And I've been sort of letting this boil in me. And now we're going to talk about it. Now we're really going to talk about why the Disney fan films piss me off so bad. And we're going to start with the worst of all of them. At least in my opinion. Solo. Solo, there's... Back me up here, chat. There's just so many reasons that Solo is bad, right? Even if you're good with the Disney stuff, even if you kind of like at even some of the Disney stuff, like, Solo was bad, right? But I'm not here to tell you that. You already know that. I'm here to tell you how bad and why it was bad. So I did something that I've only done once before. I watched Solo this morning, and I took a whole bunch of notes. I have those notes in front of me. So I watched Solo again. And so, beef number one, and not necessarily my number one beef, just the first one I started writing down, okay? They have the girlfriend, Kira, right? And they give her a cute little name, and she's this cute little girl, and she's always this damsel in distress figure. First of all, I don't think there's any version of Han Solo where he doesn't get sick of that. Right? And second of all, okay, this is like the last girlfriend that he has on Corellia before he sort of moves on from Corellia. Okay? Number one, Han doesn't really move on from Corellia. He keeps going back. Number two, his last girlfriend on Corellia before he mostly moved on is this girl named Zala. I will put her name in the chat. Zala. Zala is introduced in the Dark Empire comics. Go read the Dark Empire comics. They are awesome. And Zala is a badass. Zala is no damsel in distress. Zala is very much in the Leia Organa archetype, where she can take care of herself and she can take care of you and all the people chasing you if she has to. With the difference that Zala is not a politician. She's kind of a smuggler kind of girl, kind of a rogue kind of girl. Just the type of person you would expect Han to really go after. This very powerful figure who knows exactly what she wants and can put up a fight against Han Solo. How tired would Han get of somebody who's just like, oh, take me with you. Oh, yeah, I know. Oh, I won't do anything to upset you. My God. Han would never be with somebody like that for more than a week. I don't think he could do it. He needs somebody who'll yell back at him. He needs somebody who will take the gun out of his hand, shoot open the chute to the garbage, and push him in. That's how he likes it, right? Of course, it almost got him killed, but he wouldn't have it any other way. And Zala is that type of girl. She was that type of girl. And so that's my first beef that I wrote down. Not my number one, but just the first one that I wrote down. Kira is this. She's just a damsel in distress. And let me just say, they could have done the exact same plot with a Zala character. They did not have to go with this damsel in distress archetype. It's stupid. It's not somebody Han would care about for long term. And she, yeah, well, she had eventually had training in fighting, yes. But when it came right down to it, she was still an underling. She was still somebody that somebody had saved, and she had given her loyalty to them, and that's all there was to her. Very two-dimensional character, and it was completely unnecessary. Zala would have been great. Zala is a truly dynamic three-dimensional character that jumps out at you and says, "Oh my goodness, this is incredible." Okay, she's somebody that if she's working with Han, you want to cheer her. If she's working against Han, you want to boo her. Kira, when she's working with Han, you just want Han to save her. When she's working against Han, you just go, "Oh well, of course." Right? She had to survive. In fact, that's like her tagline. Just survive. Like, how much simpler of a character could you come up with? Just one of the examples in the way that the creation of this movie was just plain lazy. Okay? All right. The second thing I wrote down. I cannot believe that they made the story of Han and Chewie coming together a side plot. Just this thing that happened over here, and it happened, and all of a sudden they were both happy with being together with each other. Like, they did not explore the relationship at all. They just made them friends, just like that. Made them allies, just like that. Made them trust each other, just like that. The story of Han Solo and Chewbacca and what they have to go through to become who they are by the time we get to episode 4 is a monster story. It's a huge story. And they could have done this entire movie just about that story, and it wouldn't have been just this stupid action flick. It would have been a deep, emotional story. And they could have done that. They could have made the majority of this movie the story of Han and Chewie coming together. There's enough there for beginning. There's enough. Okay. Maybe even throw in a little bit of winning the Falcon, which that's yet another thing. The whole winning of the Falcon was sloppy and lazy also. Okay? Ooh, Lando's a cheater. Ooh, we stole his cheating card out from under him, and now we win. Ha ha ha. So, first of all, Lando's a good enough gambler that he doesn't have to cheat. So is Han. Second of all, the story of how it happened in the Legends, in the expanded universe, is such a much better story. If you want to read that story, um, there is a collection of 3 books. They were 3 separate books, but it's just the Han Solo trilogy. That starts with At Star's End, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. Um, where you get to learn about this. You also get to learn about it in the book Millennium Falcon. It's one of the last Legends books in the timeline, and we'll talk more about Millennium Falcon when it comes up. But I figured I should mention that. Um, if they had had Han win the Falcon at the end and set up Han and Chewie's like first real mission together, which was going back to Kashyyyk, Chewbacca's homeworld, and um, doing something for his family, for Chewie's family there, they could have set up a Chewbacca film. But no, this is all. They chose to throw this out. This movie is a really good. I don't know if it's the best, but it's a really good example of absolutely everything that Disney did wrong, just because they wanted to create their own story. Okay, we don't want to use the stuff from the books, which they did anyways. And I will get into that as we get into um, the episode fan films at a later date. But they they so badly wanted to create their own story that they neglected to understand that there was a good story out there and that it would have been perfectly fine for them to use it. They own the whole freaking franchise. Like, it just, to put Kira in there, uh, and to not even consider Zala, to take away the long story of Chewie and Han coming together. It just very disappointing. They decided that they needed more of an action film. They ignored the intimacy that they could have had with the story that already existed. And that is maybe the most disappointing thing to me that came out of this film is you have to put up with that. And that's the first thing I see overall when I think about this film. Um, is they threw things away. Now, on top of that, in the original Legends story, in the original EU story, Han Solo rescues Chewie from slavery, not from being some monster that they're just replacing a Rancor with just because. 5 years earlier. Oh no, I'm sorry. Um, no, yeah, no, 5 years later. This film is supposed to occur at 10 BBY before the Battle of Yavin. Um, the original stories placed it at 5 BBY instead. Um, I don't know exactly why. Maybe they wanted a younger Han Solo. I sort of assume they just wanted a younger Han Solo. And The way you're able to place this is because they give Chewbacca's age. We know that Chewbacca is 200 years old in episode 4, which is 0 BBY or ABY, just 0 it is when the Battle of Yavin occurs. Um, so he's 200 years old for the Battle of Yavin, and they name his age as 190 years old. Why they decided to change the timeline, again, just another way that they were like, oh, we're just going to make sure that this story has nothing to do with the Legends story. Um, then comes some of the confusing stuff for me. Some of the stuff that really, like, I couldn't even figure out why you would do that. Okay? The Pikes are still in charge of Kessel. I am completely unsure about why that makes sense. 10 BBY is essentially 10 years, well, it's like 9 or 10 years after the Empire has taken control. The Empire would have immediately taken control of Kessel. Uh, the the spice there is too valuable. Too many smugglers dealing with stuff. The Empire would have come in there, crushed whoever was running it, and set themselves up there. It's too convenient of a place for slave labor, which the Empire was a big fan of, especially with non-human races. There's too many reasons why the Empire does go in there and um, buy at least 18, 17 BBY. Kessel is being run by the Empire. Uh, Um, so that didn't make sense to me either. Then of course we have the fact that Kessel's all wrong. I'll get to that. Um, but we've got the Pikes controlling Kessel. Like, makes no sense. And I think the only reason they did that is because if you remember, Maul, formerly Darth Maul, took over the Pikes empire, became the leader of their smuggling ring, along with several others in the Clone Wars series. And maybe they wanted Maul to still have a connection because of the way that they chose to end Solo. Why they had to bring Maul in, I'm not even sure. But they just thought, ooh, a cool cameo. Everybody wants to see Maul again. Um, and I suppose I kind of get that, but again, just sloppy, lazy writing. We'll just throw in a character that we know is popular for no real good reason. They made it seem like they were setting up a sequel, but of course no sequel came because Solo did awful, and instead of sticking to their guns, they just threw it on the shelf and said, well, let's not deal with that idea. If you want to read, so they sort of introduced for the first time, really in sort of a bigger way, the game Sabacc or Sabak. I suppose it depends on how you want to pronounce it. If you really want to read about Sabacc, about the game, about the rules, about how it runs, if you wanted to, like, I actually created rules for a system. I don't know where they are anymore, but I created rules for a system where you could play Sabacc with just a regular deck of cards. But if you want to sort of understand the game a little more, have a real look into playing Sabacc, read The Courtship of Princess Leia. It's near the beginning. Really good book, by the way. Some really cool stuff happens. I've reviewed it before. But if you really want to know about Sabacc, the card game, read The Courtship of Princess Leia. You'll have a much better insight into it. Okay. Now comes a part that really made my blood boil. There's this little like offhand comment about the Woody Harrelson character, and they're just trying to build him up. They're just trying to make his character seem impressive, and they just say, "Oh, you're the one who killed Aurra Sing." Okay, if you don't know who Aurra Sing is, Aurra Sing is that white-skinned, female-looking humanoid in Star Wars Episode 1 that was sort of standing off to the side while during the pod race that Anakin won. That's Aurra Sing. She's got like a bald head, but a weird thing on top, and very cool looking character. Aurra Sing. I hope I'm going to spell this right. Aurra Sing? Who's a grump? I wish you were here. You could help me spell it correctly. So they just make this offhanded comment that Woody Harrelson's character, "Oh, you're the one who killed Aurra Sing." Number one, spoiler alert, Aurra Sing makes it into the post-Jedi Legends books. She is a long-living species. She's one of the best bounty hunters around. I mean, she's not quite Boba Fett. She's not quite Jango Fett. She's not quite Cad Bane, but she's fairly close to a Bossk and stuff like that. She's at that second tier, which is still very good, a little more affordable, but still get the job done kind of thing. And they don't even show it. They don't do a flashback about it. They don't do anything. They just casually mention it, and that's it. Just this offhanded comment. You killed Aurra Sing, who Aurra Sing was, for more context here, Aurra Sing is the main teacher to Boba Fett as he's learning the bounty hunter trade in the Clone Wars series. Really? Really? Some guy just managed to kill her? It's ridiculous. And again, it illustrates how lazy they were and how much they wanted to get away from the Legends stories, the EU stories, because when you kill off Aurra Sing like that, you're just saying, hey, we're throwing that character away. We're getting rid of her. She's not going to show up later. We're throwing her in the garbage. You're never going to see her. Never again. If you want to see her, watch the 1 second clip of her in episode 1 or the 2 or 3 episodes that have her in it in the Clone Wars series. That's all you're going to get of Aurra Sing. We've killed off Aurra Sing. We don't like her. Now, I do want to say this. They could bring back Aurra Sing, right? There's nothing saying that Woody Harrelson's character, like, cut her head off and brought it to somebody, and they're keeping it as a trophy or anything like that. They just sort of casually mention that he killed her. She could come back for revenge at any time. Aurra Sing probably isn't that easy to kill, right? But let's take them at their word. They killed Aurra Sing, a character that you could do so much with, a badass character that they just decided we don't want that one. We're sick of this reality where Aurra Sing exists. It's almost spiteful, it seems. Like, why would you do that other than to be spiteful? That's what it seems to say. We just want to get rid of some popular stuff from that expanded universe, from that Legends universe. That's all it seems to say. I mean, they're going to make Grand Moff Tarkin a lesser character if they're not careful. You know? All right. Moving on from Aurra Sing. I was really upset when I heard that line. I could not believe that that line was said. Um, the Sabacc game, not nearly as interesting as the one in the books, where Han actually does win the Millennium Falcon from Lando Calrissian. It's such a much better story. If you want to hear that story, please say so in chat. Otherwise, I'm going to let you find it. I know it's talked about in the Millennium Falcon book, but in the Han Solo trilogy, like, they get into the specifics of it. They really delve into the story. So if you really want to know about it, either let me know in the chat, or at the very least, go. Well, I guess the least would be just letting me know in the chat. Or if you really want to know the story yourself, go read the Han Solo trilogy, starting with At Star's End. I think that's the first one. I know it's one of the three. Okay. The one of the beefs I have with this is that in the movie Solo, in the fan film, Han looks at the Millennium Falcon and does exactly what Luke did, just says it's a piece of junk. Until he flies it and realizes how incredible it is, but originally he looks at it and thinks it's a piece of junk. In the books, that never happens. The moment Han looks at the Falcon, he is completely infatuated with it. He needs to have that ship. He knows that him and that ship belong together. It is a romance written in the stars. And he will do whatever he has to get it from Lando. Which, of course, becomes the case later on in the movie. But it doesn't start that way. And one of the magical things about Han's relationship with the Falcon is that it was magical from the beginning. He doesn't have to come to appreciate it. He just he looks at it and he just knows this is one of the most incredible ships in the galaxy, and I have to have it. Okay. And so now that we're talking about the Falcon, I have a little prop here. It is the Transformers Han Solo Chewbacca combined to make Millennium Falcon figure. And this, as you can tell from the circular dish, is the old original Falcon. You'll notice there's not enough room here, doesn't seem, for an escape pod. And, okay, so this whole escape pod thing, the escape pod in the movie, there's an escape pod right here. And, so, okay, let's go through the logic of this. Here's what I want to know with this escape pod. How does it make sense at all? Okay, so imagine you're flying. Whee! We're flying through the galaxy. Yay! You're flying through the galaxy. And you get in trouble. Oh no, somebody's shooting at me. Either they're shooting at you like this, or they're shooting at you like this. So, it doesn't make any sense to put an escape pod here where if they're shooting at you, if they're coming at you and shooting at you, you're going to shoot yourself directly into the line of fire. It doesn't make any sense to have an escape pod back here anywhere, even like underneath here. Oh, the batteries are out. I thought that was going to be a cool moment. It lights up if the batteries are working. It doesn't make any sense to have, yes, total fail, Critter Cuddler. I know. It doesn't make sense to have an escape pod back here, because if they're attacking you from behind, if they're chasing you, you're again just going to launch yourself directly into their path of shooting. So it makes no sense for an escape pod to be at the front or back of any ship. Right? Just doesn't make sense. It makes so little sense that they've never done it on a real plane, jet, anything like that. Where is the emergency eject? Where does it take you? Straight up. Out of the line of fire. You would want something that takes you out of the line of fire, right? Well, you want to know where the escape pods are? There's one right here. And there's one right here. Then something else. If you remember, in the Solo movie, no gun turret, no gun turret. All they have are these little dinky guns that were originally with the YT-1400. Yes, lifeboats and everything is on the side. Exactly. Thank you. And they didn't have the bigger dish. Han made a bunch of modifications to the Falcon. So you're telling me he made all these modifications, but he didn't bother replacing the escape pod? What? It's one and done? You never get to replace it? If you use that escape pod, you had better be sure that the ship is going to explode because you're never going to get another escape pod. Come on. The Corellian shipyards, where this came from, would have been way smarter than that. They would have had tons of escape pods just waiting to resell to people. They're not going to like make them so expensive that you can't afford them. They're not going to be super cheap either. But they're going to be something that you can get a replacement for. The YT-1400 was one of the most popular models to ever come out of Corellia. They wouldn't have abandoned the design. They wouldn't have abandoned the escape pods. They would have just made sure that there were plenty of escape pods. So even at like nearly 100 years old, which is approximately how old the Falcon is by the time Han gets his hands on it. Um, somewhere, something like that, maybe only 75, but it's a pretty old ship by the time Han gets his hands on it. Even at that age, the YT-1400s were so popular um, that they would have kept manufacturing escape pods for him. In fact, in the books, the escape pods get used several times, and somehow there's still escape pods on the Falcon. Gee, how did that happen? You wouldn't just never replace the escape pod. You just wouldn't do it. And you wouldn't take up valuable, like what are these supposed to be then on the side here? What is this? If it's not an escape pod, then okay, it's not an escape pod, but it's crucial to the ship, symmetrically put on both sides. It's got to be something important. You wouldn't just replace it with escape pods. You couldn't. You'd have to redesign the whole ship. And clearly, the Millennium Falcon that's in Solo looks at least close enough to Han Solo's modified Millennium Falcon that there is some connection between the two. Right? So, the whole Millennium Falcon thing, like, I just can't. It's, makes my blood boil. Then, of course, they show up on Kessel, and Kessel is such a big disappointment. It's all wrong. If you want a really good depiction of Kessel, read Jedi Search, the first book in the Jedi Academy trilogy by Kevin J. Anderson. Really good book, and you start the book by getting to learn some stuff about Kessel and about the Kessel Run, which they managed to screw up too. Well, I don't know. I wasn't completely displeased with the Kessel Run idea. What they ruined was the story of Han making the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. That could have been the right depiction. There's no reason it shouldn't have been. But there's a better story as to when he had to make the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. Okay? And Kessel's all wrong, and I don't want to spoil a book for you, so I'm just going to tell you, read Jedi Search, read the Jedi Academy trilogy, if you want to know more details about Kessel. It's really, really cool. It's got some really great detail into it, and it gives you a Kessel that's worth learning about. This Kessel was ridiculous. There was nothing worth learning about in it anyways, and not to mention that they didn't really talk about it, right? All they did was they took you there and had you on the surface for a little while, didn't tell you anything about it, and took you away. Something that got repeated in the Clone Wars series. Bad Dave Filoni. You had a chance there. Something that they could have gone more into, and they just never did. So disappointing, because the whole Kessel story in the Legends books, especially in Jedi Search, is just so good. Just the description, so very good. I'm drinking out of a new water bottle today. My wife just bought me, Critter Cuddler just bought me. And when I opened it today, there's like a piece of paper in it. And I figured it was like instructions or like the manufacturer warranty or whatever. I poured it out. It's a strip from a 3x5 index card with somebody's telephone number written on it in red ink. That's interesting. Critter Cuddler, my wife, decided she was going to text that number with a picture of the bottle. But I don't think anything's come of that yet today, has it? I don't think it has. Anyway, let's get back. What else? Oh, you did get a reply. What did it say? Tell me about it. So yes, Kessel is all wrong. And then let's get into L3. They were just bored. Okay. Let's get into L3 and so not even an employee. Just somebody who decided to do it. I had a weird moment when they so L3 like sacrifices herself. Yeah, me too. L3 sacrifices herself to let them get away, right? And they basically pull off her head and a little bit of her torso to get away. And I gotta look at the top of her head, like the dome part. And I don't know if it's just me, and I don't know if anybody else in the chat wants to confirm, but holy crap, it looked like she was made by Abstergo, the Assassin's Creed company. It looked like the same logo. It was really strange. Like, I'm just looking at like, did Abstergo make L3? What? Why would they do that? Yeah, Abstergo, their little side hustle is making droids. That's weird. All right. And then another thing that made me mad. Why? Okay, so I'm watching. And they get to the point where there's this giant monster that chases them and eventually gets like sucked into the black hole maw. By the way, I'm glad they at least kept the name the maw. They didn't say the maw cluster, unfortunately, but they at least kept the name the maw. There was this creature that came after them, and the way they came up upon the creature, why? Of all the nostalgic things that you might want to bring into a Star Wars movie, who would ever think of the powers out, powers back, episode 1 moment where they have the giant fish that's going to eat them? What? Again, the laziness of this film. Like, seriously. Somebody would just watch an episode 1 one day and they were like, oh, I want to put the let's turn the power back on and have the big eye open moment again. Because that hasn't been overdone at all. Wow. Like, there's so many great nostalgic moments that you could have gone through. Now, granted, they had used up most of them for episode 7. But there were still some gems in there somewhere, I'm sure. Before you got to the let's turn the power back on and have the giant eye looking at us moment. It's now, maybe they didn't think anybody would notice, but I noticed. And I know lots of other Star Wars fans out there would notice too. It just, the complete laziness of this film, the complete obstruction to a good story in some cases. They decide to retell the Kessel Run story without all the best parts to the story, which is the backstory to why he had to make it. They decide to make a whole new story behind it. It just, again, they're just trying to take away a previous story. And when you had such a good previous story, why did you feel the need to just ruin it and destroy it just so you can have your own? The epitome of making a fan film out of this just being a fan film. Okay. Um, they felt the need to invent this one. I really didn't understand. This is another one of those, like, why? They created a whole new fuel that you'd never heard of before the movie. Like, there were names of fuels before this. The books had a fuel. They were mining it on Bespin, Tabana gas. It was the thing that was powering all the ships. That's why Lando was on Cloud City. That's why he was running Cloud City. He was mining Tabana gas, which he then sold as the raw ingredient, the main ingredient for fuel. Why do you feel the need to create this? Even above all the other stuff, this doesn't even come out of the books. This is straight out of one of the movies. And they felt like, oh, no, we need our own fuels. We need our own fuel for this. We can't just take from something that's already there. That wouldn't be creative at all. Give me a break. This is, oh man. I just don't get it. Even more than you're being stupid about it. Like, I just don't understand what your motivation behind it is. If anybody in the chat understands that motivation, please put it in there. I tagged Mark Hamill in this. If you're watching, Mark, please bring somebody in here to help explain this. I know Mark Hamill's not watching. I'm not delusional. So they have all that. They decide to retell the story without anything. They invent a new fuel source, and then the Maul thing. It's okay. It's interesting. Maul is an incredible character, so popular that they felt the need to continue keeping him alive, even after he'd been chopped like completely in half. They felt the need to keep him alive and bring him back in the Clone Wars series and in the Rebels series, and then at the end of this movie. That's fine. He's a popular character. But I'm not so sure he's supposed to fit here. Okay. They just kind of stuck him in there. Now, granted, he is supposed to still be alive because we need him to be alive for the Rebels series, which is even a little bit after this. Rebels series is like 4 BBY, something like that. This is supposed to be 10 BBY. So we've got 5-6 years, something like that, for Maul to still be alive and create problems and all that. But they just kind of stick him in there. They don't say a whole lot about him. It seems pretty obvious to me that they were setting this up as a sequel where Maul was going to be a central character. And maybe they're trying to take from that, and I've heard rumors that they're going to interject him into the Obi-Wan series, which really doesn't make any sense to me. Because we already saw Maul get killed again by Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Rebels series. But I've heard that Maul's going to be in there, and maybe they're using the end of Solo to set up that in in uh, in the Obi-Wan series. But we saw a lot of Maul's story. I mean, we saw a ton of Maul's story in the Clone Wars series and in the Rebels series. And now they just have him hanging out on Dathomir for no good reason. Even though he was, I, I, I don't know. Maybe the one bright spot to that, the one good thing that could come out of that is maybe you get to have Asajj Ventress team up with Maul and do some cool stuff. That would be interesting. Be an interesting fan series right there. But I'm not so sure that they're going to do that. They may be looking to throw the whole Solo story away. They certainly it's pretty obvious to me that Solo ruined the chances of a lot of other of the one-off films. You know, they were supposed to make a Yoda film. I haven't heard anything about that for years. They were supposed to make. There was supposed to be a whole series of these one-off films, and I guess I can understand the logic. Like, if if the if the if the Han Solo film didn't do well, why do we think any other one-off films, solo films? I'm trying not to say solo because that'll be confusing. One-off films wouldn't also tank. I mean, they had success with Rogue One. Someday I'll do a Rogue One bitching fest, but it won't be nearly as bad as this. It'll be little ticky tack things instead. This overall was just a complete disaster. Okay. So I have been bitching and moaning about Solo for an hour now. And I feel a little bit better. And so it's time to move on.